All right, section 8.7. Try to wipe the tears away from your eyes if this is our last section for this year. I mean, typically we had a little bit more to cover, but with all that's going on, this is all the further we're going to get, and it's actually all I 100% need to cover. So with that being said, it is our Law of Cosines, our last lesson, and you're going to see that today's lesson, it's going to remind you of a lesson that we've done in the past that you guys are pretty familiar with. So I will start by saying, again, we use Law of Cosines when it's not a right triangle. Otherwise, we would typically use Pythagorean theorem to find lengths of sides, or SOHCAHTOA to find angle measures or lengths of sides. So we use Law of Sines whenever it's not a right triangle. So definition for the Law of Cosines says it allows us to solve a triangle when the Law of Sines cannot be used. So again, solving a triangle means we should end up with 6 total pieces of information. We should know the angle measure, each angle measure, and we should know each side length. So there are 3, let me get my pen to work. There are 3 sort of like formulas, if you will, there for the Law of Cosines, but they all have something in common. So it's not like you have to remember 3 of them. If you notice, whatever side is first, that is the angle we take the cosine of. So if I have A on the left-hand side, I do the cosine of A. If I have B on the left-hand side, I do the cosine of B. If I have C on the left-hand side, I do the cosine of C. And if you also take notice, that first portion, and I'll start with this bottom one, C squared equals A squared plus B squared. That looks just like what that one is, exactly Pythagorean theorem. The other 2 are very similar, except I have A squared equals B squared plus C squared, or B squared equals A squared plus C squared. So we're going to work through this, but whatever is on the left-hand side, let me erase all my lines. Whatever's on the left-hand side, that's what we take the cosine of. And then if you notice, A is not used anywhere in there again. So we start with side A, we end with angle A, and everything else in the middle is our B and C. Okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at example 1 so we can see how this works. We have to find X if Y is 11, Z is 25, and angle X is 45 degrees. So this one, they gave us the triangle, they labeled it for us, so let's go ahead and get started. If we are trying to find X, that is lowercase x, so that must mean that is opposite angle X. Okay, so you always want to put the side that you are finding on the left-hand side of the equal sign. So in this case, it's going to be x squared equals, and you know what, maybe I'm going to put the letters down. I'm going to do a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2bc. Now, the other thing I want you to take notice to, it's times the cosine of a. So if you wanted to, you could label these as a, b, c. And then that would be lowercase a, 11 would be lowercase b, and 25 would be lowercase c. So that might be helpful, and since they decided to use different letters. So now I'm going to substitute everything in. So I get x squared is equal to 11 squared plus 25 squared minus 2 times 11 times 25 times the cosine of angle A, which is 45. So one thing about this, if you notice, everything here, there's no variables. So it's a matter of just going through and doing the problem. So I'll do this a little bit step by step. You could type this in the calculator all at once if you would prefer. So I get x squared is equal to 121 plus 625. I multiplied 2, 11, and 25 together to get 550 cosine of 45. Don't forget, this is all multiplied. So I can't take 625 minus 550. Can't do it. But what we can do is add those two together and get 746. and whoops, my 7 does not want to come through. There we go. Minus, and then 550 times the cosine of 45 gives us 388.91. When we subtract those two, we get x squared is equal to 357.1. But x is not by itself, so we have to take the square root of both sides, and we get that x is approximately 18.9. All right, so 18.9. Pause the video, take a moment, try this your turn, then come back and check your work. All right, so you can see I skipped a couple of the steps in simplifying, but you end up getting r squared is equal to 513.6, and then square root that, you get 22.66. All right, let's keep moving along, because again, this is sort of a longer lesson. All right, so the last two, if you noticed, we found lengths of sides. So now we have to say, okay, how can I use this theorem to find an angle measure? Because it's actually going to take a little bit more solving. So find the measure of angle L. So that angle right there. So I'm going to use, I just always use a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2bc times the cosine of A. A in this case is going to be L. Okay, so I'm going to do, since I want to find angle L, I need to put the length that is across from angle L in for this left side. So in this case, it's going to be 24 squared equals 5 squared plus 27 squared minus 2 times 5 times 27 times the cosine of L. So now we have a little bit of work to do because my variable's over here. But let's take it step by step. 24 squared is 576. We'll simplify what we know. 5 squared is 25. 27 squared is 729. I'm going to multiply 5 times 2 times 27, and we get 270 times the cosine of L. I can simplify those two things together. So 576 is equal to 754 minus 27 times, not 27, 270. You know what, I don't like any of that. So 754 minus 270 times the cosine of L. Now, a lot of people, they're going to want to take 754, subtract 270, and get on with the problem, but you cannot do that. This is one term being held together by multiplication. If you had 754 minus 2x, and that was equal to 576, would you take 754 minus 2? We would not do that. So please don't do that here. All right, so I'm going to subtract 754 from both sides, and I end up getting negative 178 is equal to negative 270 times the cosine of L. Now that that term is by itself, I can divide both sides by negative 270. So I end up getting a positive 0.6593 is equal to the cosine of L. And then I have to do the cosine inverse of both sides. And once you do that, you should get that the measure of angle L is approximately 48.8 degrees. All right, so take a moment, try the your turn, and then come back and check your work. All right, so we found that F was approximately 28.1 degrees. All right, I'm just going to let you guys look over this little key concept box. It tells you if you're given a right triangle versus any triangle, and what information you're giving, how to go about using or solving for that triangle. All right, last example coming up. My pen keeps blinking red at me, so hopefully it lasts through this one. It says determine whether the law of sines or the law of cosines should be used to first solve triangle DEF, then solve triangle DEF and round the angle measures to the nearest degree and the side measures to the nearest tenth. So you can use that little key concept box. I can fit it all on. So it's not a right triangle, so we're gonna forego that top part. We are given two sides and an angle. So two sides and the included angle. All right, so that is telling us that we should use law of cosines. So law of cosine. And if you're really not sure, it's not like you have to memorize all this, just try using one of them. And if you find yourself stuck and you don't have enough information, then use the other one. So we have to solve this. We need to find all pieces of information. So let's see, what do we want to do? Let's start with finding side F. We'll do that. So law of cosine, so I'm going to do F squared equals 17 squared plus 32 squared minus 2 times 17 times 32 times the cosine of 145. You're going to have to bear with me for this problem because I don't have this one worked out ahead of time. So we get F squared is equal to 289 plus 32 squared is 1024. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and add those two together. All right, 2 times 17 times 32. That gives us 1088 cosine of 145. And I'm just going to go ahead and figure out what that is, times the cosine of 145. I think I messed it up, so I'm going to do it again just to be certain. Okay, so it's going to change this to a plus because we end up getting a negative. So 891.24. That is F squared. So add that to 1313. And we get 421.76, and then take the square root of that. So we get F is approximately, and I'm wondering if I messed up somewhere because I got a different answer on my paper. I do just have all the answers there. I got 20.54, but on my paper it says that F should be 47. So I'm going to go back through here and see where I made a mistake. So F squared equals 17 squared plus 32 squared minus 2 times 17 times 32 times the cosine of 45. 17 squared is 289. 32 squared is 1024. 2 times 17 times 32, that is 1088. All right, so 289 plus 1024, we get 1313. Minus 1088 times the cosine of 145. I do get that negative, so that makes that a plus. Oh, I know what I did. Goodness. I think I know. Yep, that's where it was. I accidentally had a minus in my calculator when I added those two. So that's easy enough to fix. When I add those two, yes, yep, that's exactly what I did. 2204.24. And now when we take the square root of that, we get 46.95. Round angle measures to the nearest degree. So that's how I have F is 47. Up to the nearest tenth. Okay. Still 47.0 because I'd have to round the 9. All right, so that one worked out. Thank goodness. Now we have to find angle D or angle E. So just because I use law of cosines for that doesn't mean I have to continue using it. So actually, for me to find either angle D or angle E, I'm going to use law of sines. I'm going to do D first. So I'm going to do the sine of D over 32 equals F, which is 47 over 145. And I'm lying to you again. So the sine of 145 over 47. There we go. Someday I'll get this straightened out. So the sine of D is going to equal 32 times the sine of 145 divided by 47. And then I'm running out of room, but we have to take the sine inverse of all of that. And once you take the sine inverse, you get approximately 23 degrees. Okay, so we're 2 for 2. And then finally, to find that last angle, you could use the law of sines again if you wanted to, but we could just do 180 minus 145 minus 23, and you should end up getting about 12 degrees for the measure of angle E. All right, so take a moment, try these last two your turns. My pen is about to not last too much longer, so I'm just going to write down the answers for you. I do know this first one says find capital B. Just going to do a little magic here. And we're going to put lowercase b because, look, they already gave you angle B, so let's do a little more work. So you are finding lowercase b and then the measure of angle C. So pause the video, do your work, come back and check your answer. All right, so I wrote down the answers because I really don't think my pen's going to make it for me going through all the work. But if you have questions, don't forget, send me a message on Remind, and I will gladly help you out. So give yourself a pat on the back, take a big sigh of relief. Last lesson finished.